He saw in Miguel the only chance of redemption after the tragedy that had shattered his family. A heavy secret that hung over the mansion like morning mist over Uro Verde. Dr. Alencar, in his relentless search for his son's cure, built an invisible barrier of rules and expectations, suffocating the little spontaneity Miguel had left. The boy, in turn, felt every gesture from his father as a constant reminder of his condition, a silent echo of what he no longer was. The wheelchair, once a symbol of his confinement, was now almost an extension of his body, and silence his only form of protest. He watched the world from the window, wishing only for a piece of life outside, of the freedom that the smell of wet earth promised. The river stone in his hand was his own small universe, a secret kept from his father. It represented the raw texture of the world, the silent strength of nature he so craved. No one in the mansion knew about the stone, not even Mrs. Elsa, the kind-eyed housekeeper who tried, with her discreet affection, to break the ice that enveloped Miguel. The truth is, Dr. Alencar was not a cruel man, but a broken one, haunted by a past mistake, by a decision that had cost too much. He believed that by fixing Miguel he would also fix himself. But the rigidity of his love was a prison. The boy felt it, the pressure of being his father's life project, the blank canvas where he projected his own failures. Have you ever felt that pressure, that silent expectation, that weighs more than 1,000 words? It's a heavy burden for an 11-year-old boy. Miguel spent his mornings in the living room, under Mrs. Elsa's watchful eye. One day, while his father was at his office, the boy saw the housekeeper retrieve an old dusty wooden box from a high shelf. The box seemed forgotten there, with a faint smell of mold and lavender. Mrs. Elsa, unaware of Miguel's fixed gaze, opened the box and took out a small photo album. It was a simple album, with a faded cover, unlike the luxurious albums Dr. Alencar kept in the library. She flipped through a few pages, and a sad smile formed on her lips as she looked at one of the images. Then quickly, as if caught red-handed, she put the album back and hid the box, covering it with some old books. What was in those photos that Mrs. Elsa didn't want anyone to see? And why did she keep them so secretly? Write your name and the city you're watching from in the comments below. I want to get to know you better. The scene was etched in Miguel's mind. That box, that album, Mrs. Elsa's smile and haste. It was like a small crack in the wall of silence that surrounded him. A detail that didn't fit into the perfect, controlled routine of the mansion. He knew something was hidden there, something that might fill the gaps in his own story. The Alencar mansion, with its vast rooms and windows overlooking a garden Miguel couldn't explore, was a labyrinth of unspoken memories and secrets. His father, Dr. Alencar, rarely mentioned Miguel's mother. Her image was present in a few framed photographs, always with a gentle, distant smile, but never in conversation. It was as if she had disappeared not just physically, but also from the house's memory, swept under the rug of perfection. Miguel's silence was not just a response to his paralysis. It was also a form of resistance, a shield against the truth he felt was being hidden. He spent hours watching the birds in the garden, imagining what it would be like to fly, to feel the ground beneath his feet. The river stone in his hand was his only solace. The only thing connecting him to a world he felt had been stolen from him. Dr. Alencar, in his blind devotion, organized Miguel's life on a military schedule, physical therapy, private lessons, consultations with renowned specialists, all to fix the boy. But Miguel didn't want to be fixed. He wanted to be understood, loved for who he was, not for what he could become. With each new appointment, each new experimental treatment, his father's hope shone with painful intensity, and Miguel's frustration grew in silence. He felt that he wasn't Miguel to his father, but rather a problem to be solved. This was the deepest injustice. One day, while his father was again absent, on one of those medical conference trips that seemed to last longer than necessary, Miguel decided to act. He couldn't walk, but his eyes were sharp and his mind curious. He maneuvered his chair carefully to the shelf where Mrs. Elsa had hidden the box. With considerable effort, he stretched his arm and pushed the old books aside, revealing the dark wood of the box. His heart pounded. What would he find there? Would it reveal the secret his father guarded so jealously? He felt he was about to touch something forbidden, but curiosity was too strong to resist. He needed answers. With trembling hands, Miguel stretched his arm, feeling his fingertips brush the rough wood of the box. The effort was immense for a boy who depended on wheels to move, but the adrenaline, the promise of a hidden truth, gave him a strength he didn't know he possessed. Slowly, carefully not to knock everything over, he pulled the box to the edge of the shelf. The scraping sound of wood against varnish seemed like thunder in the silent house, and with every millimeter the box moved forward, his heart raced. Would anyone hear? Would his father return earlier than expected? Finally, the heavy box landed with a thud on the floor, and Miguel opened it with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. There it was, dusty and faded, the same album Mrs. Elsa had hidden. It was a simple object, almost insignificant. But for Miguel, at that moment, it was the key to a universe of unanswered questions. His hands, still restless, leafed through the yellowed pages, and the first image that caught his eye was that of his mother. She was beautiful, smiling, not like in the formal photos his father kept, but with a lightness he had never seen. Beside her, a man who was not his father. Miguel felt a chill in his stomach. Who was he? His mother's smile was different, freer, more genuine. And there was something in that man's gaze, a complicity, an affection that Dr. Alencar, with all his devotion, never seemed to show. The photos followed, his mother and the man on a picnic in a park Miguel recognized as the botanical garden of the capital, then on a small fishing beach with the sun beating down on their faces. In one of them, the man held his mother's hand and she rested her head on his shoulder, a gesture of intimacy that made Miguel's chest tighten. He had never seen photos like these. His father always spoke of his mother as an almost ethereal, idealized figure. But these images revealed a living woman, with passions and a past that Dr. Alencar seemed to have erased. With each turned page, a new piece of the puzzle emerged, but instead of clarifying, everything seemed to become even more confused. Why were these photos hidden? Why did his father never mention this man? What really happened before the accident, before his life turned into an eternal recovery project? Have you ever felt like this? Discovering a truth that changes everything you thought you knew. It's a shock, a revelation that makes you question every step, every word said or unsaid. If this story of hidden truths touched you, comment Miguel's Truth below and tell me what city you're watching from. It's important for us to connect and discover together what lies behind certain masks. Miguel continued to flip through, looking for any clue, any detail that could make sense of those images. On one of the last pages, a small folded and almost imperceptible note slipped out of the album. It was a yellowed piece of paper with elegant feminine handwriting, which Miguel recognized as his mother's. He picked it up carefully, as if it were a fragile treasure, and his eyes scanned the words. My love, life awaits us in Uro Verde, our new home, our new beginning. I can't wait to tell Miguel. With all my love, always yours, Lucia. Uro Verde, new home. New beginning. Miguel read and reread the words. Wasn't that mansion their first home in Uro Verde? And what did she want to tell him? A shiver ran down his spine. There was more, much more behind the perfect facade his father built. Miguel's mother, Lucia, was about to reveal something that kept her excited, hopeful. And then the accident. The coincidence was too great to ignore. He looked again at the photo of his mother with the other man, then at the note. The connection was undeniable. The mansion, once a sanctuary of silence, now seemed to resonate with echoes of secrets. Dr. Alencar, in his quest for redemption, had perhaps built a sandcastle, where truths were buried beneath the surface of pain and overprotection. Miguel felt the urgency to unravel everything. He held in his hands not just an album, but the end of a thread that promised to unravel the true story of his family, and perhaps the true story of himself. He needed to know to understand who he was and who his mother truly was. But how to unravel a secret kept for so long by such a powerful and closed-off father? That album was just the beginning. Those words from his mother, written in such familiar handwriting, and the photos with an unknown man were like a silent tremor beneath Miguel's feet. The mansion, which once seemed only large and empty, now revealed itself as a treasure chest of secrets. Every corner, every shadow, seemed to hold a story that his father, Dr. Alencar, had carefully hidden. Miguel felt the weight of the discovery, a mix of excitement and icy fear. What else was there, beneath the polished surface of that perfect life his father insisted on maintaining? Dr. Alencar, in his blind devotion, continued to orchestrate Miguel's life with almost military precision. Physiotherapists, tutors, specialist doctors all entered and left the mansion like cogs in a clock, each with the mission to restore Miguel. The small rural town of Uroverde saw Dr. Alencar as a hero, a selfless father who sacrificed everything for his son's recovery. Whispered comments in public squares, looks of pity mixed with admiration, all reached Mrs. Elza's ears and somehow reached Miguel. He felt this pressure, the expectation of being the perfect son, his father's successful project. It was an invisible but heavy burden that added layers to his silence. How to tell the world that the image everyone had was only part of the truth, and that behind it there was an abyss of unspoken things. Miguel, however, was no longer the same resigned boy. The river stone in his hand, once his only confidant, now shared space with the memory of the album and the note. He needed more. Curiosity ignited by the flame of truth was stronger than fear of his father. He began to observe. Every move by Mrs. Elza, every time his father left for his conferences, Miguel planned his next steps. There was a room in the mansion that had always been forbidden, his mother's old office. Since the accident, Dr. Alencar had kept it locked, saying it was a place of painful, untouchable memories. But Miguel now knew that painful memories could also be true ones. One afternoon, when the mansion was at its deepest silence, with his father out and Mrs. Elza busy in the kitchen, Miguel decided it was time. With his wheelchair, he headed to the forbidden hallway, his heart beating like a drum. His mother's office door seemed more imposing than usual, with its dark wood and brass doorknob. He tried to turn it, but it was locked, as always. Miguel felt disappointment, but didn't give up. He remembered once, long ago when he was little, and his mother had forgotten the key under a plant pot next to the door. He stretched his arm with difficulty, and his fingers found the object. It was a small old key with floral details. With the key in hand, the boy felt a chill. That object, a cold piece of metal, was the key not only to the room but perhaps to the past. He turned the doorknob. The soft click echoed in the silence of the house, a sound that seemed to open not just a door, but a portal to a part of his mother's life he had never known. The office was dusty. The light entering through the window was dim and yellow, revealing a disarray that contrasted with the impeccable perfection of the rest of the mansion. Piles of books, loose papers, a solid wood desk. It was a portrait of a life that had been interrupted, not simply erased. Miguel maneuvered his chair carefully, moving among the furniture covered by white sheets. His eyes scanned the room, searching for any detail, any clue that could connect to the album and the note. In the center of the desk, under a thin layer of dust, was a small lacquered wooden box, dark and with mother-of-pearl details. It was a jewelry box. With trembling hands, Miguel opened the box. Inside there was some simple costume jewelry, a pair of earrings, a ring. But at the bottom, hidden under a silk scarf, he found a small gold locket delicately crafted. It wasn't something his father would give. It was different from the gifts he remembered. The locket was cold and heavy in his palm. He opened it, and there inside were two tiny photos. One was of his mother, even younger, with the same light smile from the album photos. The other was of the same man, the man who was not his father, with a gaze that conveyed an unquestionable tenderness. And on the back of the locket, an almost imperceptible engraving, the initials LA plus RM, and a date 1 month before the accident. What did those initials mean? Who was RM? And why was that date so close to the tragedy? The pieces were falling into place, but they formed a picture Miguel couldn't comprehend, a picture that contradicted everything he thought he knew about his family and about his mother's death. The silence of that room, once a refuge, now seemed to scream the truths his father was trying to hide. The silence of Miguel's mother's office, once oppressive, now seemed to vibrate with the truths he had just unearthed. The locket, cold in his hands, was more than jewelry. It was tangible proof of a life his father had tried to erase. LA and RM. The initials, the date, the tiny photos, everything screamed a love story, a passion that bloomed while life in the Alencar mansion seemed to wither. Miguel's chest tightened, a pain that wasn't physical but of the heart, of the soul. His mother, Lucia, was not the ethereal, sad figure his father painted. She was a woman of flesh and blood, with her own desires and secrets, and one of those secrets was Rodolfo Mendez. The man in the locket, the man who was not his father. The feeling that a piece was missing, once a whisper, was now a shout in Miguel's mind. He could not accept the official version of the story, his father's version. There was a betrayal there, an omission that weighed more than 1,000 lies. How can a child deal with the discovery that his parents were not who he thought, that the story of his own family was a carefully constructed farce? Have you ever found yourself facing a truth that shatters your world? It's like stepping on quicksand, where every step reveals a new abyss. Miguel, with his curiosity ignited and his heart in pieces, continued to search the office. The dusty furniture, the forgotten books, every object seemed to hold a piece of his mother. He opened drawers, rummaged through piles of papers, feeling the urgency to find more. Adrenaline pulsed through his veins, and the wheelchair, once a limit, was now just a means to reach the next clue. He couldn't stop anymore. The point of no return had been crossed the moment he opened the locket. He needed to know the whole truth, no matter the cost, even if it meant confronting his father and unearthing painful secrets. In one of the deepest drawers of the desk, under a pile of old correspondence and paid bills, Miguel found a leather folder worn by time. Inside, various documents, some scribbled with his mother's notes, others with official stamps. He flipped through them, trying to decipher Lucia's elegant handwriting, looking for something that made sense. And then he saw it. A contract, a preliminary purchase and sale agreement for a small farm on the outskirts of Uro Verde, dated 3 weeks before the accident. The buyer's name was Lucia Alencar, and the seller's name was Rodolfo Mendez. The air seemed to thin in Miguel's chest. A farm, on the outskirts of town, with Rodolfo Mendez. His mother's note, "Our new home, our new beginning," echoed in his mind with frightening clarity. His mother wasn't planning a new beginning with his father in the Alencar mansion. She was planning a new beginning with Rodolfo Mendez, somewhere else. And she was about to tell Miguel. The accident wasn't just a tragedy. It was an abrupt end to an escape plan, to a new life that never happened. The emotional cost was immense. Miguel felt a wave of anger and sadness. His father not only hid Rodolfo's existence, but also his mother's intention to leave. Everything he knew about Lucia's death, about the accident, about his own family's history, seemed like a smokescreen. His father, Dr. Alencar, the man who seemed so devoted, so suffering, was actually the guardian of a gigantic lie. The mansion, once a refuge, was now the prison of a truth. He looked at the contract, then at the locket in his other hand. The evidence was undeniable, heavy and unquestionable. Those objects, once simple pieces of paper and metal, were the key to unraveling what really happened. But how to confront his father with something so devastating? How could an 11-year-old boy unmask such a respected, powerful man who had built his own narrative of pain and sacrifice? Miguel's world was turned upside down, and he knew there was no going back. The truth, once revealed, cannot be ignored, and he felt there was still more, much more behind that accident, behind that forced silence his father imposed on Lucia's memory. What else did Dr. Alencar hide, and why? The contract with its cold and official terms, and the locket with his mother's and Rodolfo's initials, were like heavy stones in Miguel's lap. Rage bubbled in his chest, a new and overwhelming sensation. He was not just a paralyzed boy, he was a deceived son, a hostage to a carefully constructed lie. The mansion, once a refuge from his own pain, now seemed a monument to his father's hypocrisy. Every object there, every piece of furniture, every portrait of his mother, seemed to mock the truth he had just unearthed. The image of Dr. Alencar, the selfless father and hero of small Uro Verde, crumbled before Miguel's eyes. It was not devotion. It was control. It was not pure love. It was a desperate attempt to erase a past that bothered him. Miguel felt the urgent need to act, to break the silence he himself had imposed, but which now felt like a prison. He needed air, a different perspective, something that connected him to the real world. Beyond the walls of that house, the riverstone in his hand, once his only confidant, now seemed small and insignificant before the magnitude of the truth. Miguel looked out the window at the wet street and the sky threatening more rain. Life outside continued, indifferent to the dramas of the Alencar mansion, and Miguel, was there, trapped, but with a new fire burning in his chest. He could no longer be the quiet boy, the recovery project. He needed to be Miguel, the boy who sought the truth, the boy who longed for freedom and for genuine love without masks. That same afternoon, while Mrs. Elsa was in the laundry room, Miguel saw an opportunity. The kitchen door which led to the service garden was ajar. Oversight perhaps, or a gift from fate. He maneuvered his chair with a determination he had never felt before. Each turn of the wheels was an act of rebellion, a breaking of pattern. He slipped outside, feeling the fresh, damp air on his face, the smell of wet earth and grass. It was a forbidden freedom, a silent ecstasy. The service garden, with its wild plants and smell of dew, was a stark contrast to the manicured gardens in front of the mansion. He had no plan, just the need to get out, to breathe. He navigated the side street, where the houses were simpler and people less noticed. Dr. Alencar's son. The city of Uro Verde, so known and yet so unknown, opened up to him. At every corner a new discovery, a new smell, a new sound. He felt the wind in his hair, and for a moment the wheelchair seemed less like a prison and more like a vehicle for his newfound autonomy. It was then that he saw him. On a park bench under the canopy of an old mango tree, a man sat in worn clothes and with a lost gaze at the horizon. A homeless man. People hurried past, averting their gaze, ignoring his presence. But Miguel couldn't. The loneliness of that man, the invisibility he felt in himself, created an immediate connection. He stopped his chair, hesitant but driven by a greater force. In his backpack, which Mrs. Elsa always prepared with a hearty snack, Miguel had a cheese sandwich and a juice box. He took out the items, feeling the weight of the decision. His father had taught him never to talk to strangers, never to expose himself. But what did he have to lose? His life was already a lie. He extended the sandwich and juice to the man without saying a word. The man, who seemed absorbed in his own thoughts, looked up. His eyes, once dull, lit up with genuine surprise, then with profound gratitude. He took the food with calloused, trembling hands, and a slow, sincere smile formed on his lips. "Thank you, young man," he said, his voice hoarse but full of unexpected sweetness. "May God bless you." Miguel, still in silence, felt something stir within him. It wasn't the pity people felt for him, but a sense of purpose that this gesture so small had made a difference. The man ate slowly, savoring each bite, and Miguel stayed there, watching, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. "You have a good heart," the man continued, after finishing the sandwich. "A heart that sees what others don't want to see." He looked at Miguel's still legs, then at his eyes, and an air of ancient wisdom took over his face. "Sometimes we just need a reason to get up, a reason to believe." The homeless man's words, simple and direct, resonated in Miguel like a bell. A reason to get up, to believe. He who had resigned himself to silence and immobility felt a wave of energy, an urgency to fight for himself, for his mother's truth, for his own life. That encounter, so unexpected and fleeting, was the turning point. It wasn't a miracle in the magical sense, but a profound awakening, a spark of will that ignited a flame in his spirit. That man, with his silent dignity and sincere gratitude, had given him a gift far greater than he could imagine. He had given him hope. The next day, back at the mansion, Miguel woke up with a different feeling. The anger of discovery was still there, but now it was accompanied by an unshakable determination. He looked at his legs, once just a constant reminder of his confinement. What if he tried again? With all his strength, with all his will, he slid out of bed with tremendous effort. His arms trembled. He leaned on the edge of the bed, feeling the cold floor under his feet. With a groan, an internal struggle no one could hear, he tried to move one of his legs. A small tremor, a muscle that contracted. It wasn't walking. It wasn't a literal miracle, but it was a beginning. It was the will, the spark. The homeless man gave him the courage to try, the faith that he could. And that faith, that will, was the true miracle he needed. That same day, Miguel, with a clarity he had never possessed, decided he would no longer keep the secrets alone. He needed help. He needed a voice, since his own was still caught in a knot in his throat. He called Mrs. Elsa to his room. With silent tears in his eyes, he handed her the photo album, the crumpled note, the locket, and the purchase and sale contract. The housekeeper, who had always treated him with affection and respect, took the objects with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the evidence that unveiled a story of forbidden love and shattered plans. The expression on her face of shock and sadness confirmed to Miguel that he wasn't crazy, that the truth was real. Mrs. Elsa, who had always been loyal to the Alencars, but who had a just heart, looked at Miguel, at the boy she had watched grow up, and then at the documents. She understood the gravity of the situation. That silence, that pain, everything made sense now. She knew she could no longer remain silent. She could not allow Dr. Alencar to continue building his life on a web of lies, costing Miguel his own identity. She was the restorative authority Miguel needed, the bridge between the hidden truth and the justice that needed to be done. She would do whatever it took for Miguel and for Lucia's memory. The tables had turned. Mrs. Elsa wasted no time. With the album, the note, the locket, and the contract in hand, she waited for Dr. Alencar to return. The mansion, once a stage of silent lies, became the scene of a reckoning. The neurosurgeon, accustomed to having control over everything, watched his world crumble before the undeniable evidence. The photos of Lucia with Rodolfo Mendez, the note about the new beginning in Uro Verde, the locket with the initials, and finally the purchase and sale contract for the farm. All there, proving that Lucia not only planned to leave but had already taken concrete steps towards a new life. The lie of the accidental tragedy, of the devoted father, collapsed. Miguel, watching from a distance, saw in his father's eyes no longer overprotection, but the desperation of a cornered man. That day marked the end of an era of silence and deceit. Miguel, now with the truth liberated, felt strength in his legs, a tremor that was more than physical. It was the will to live, to walk on his own feet, free from the shackles of the past. Freedom, after all, was the true miracle. Dr. Alencar, confronted, had nowhere to run. The reputation he had built in Uro Verde was at stake, but Miguel's truth was more powerful. Justice silently began to make itself present. The weight of the truth was too overwhelming for Dr. Alencar. The city of Uro Verde, which once idolized him, began to see him with different eyes. His reputation, as an impeccable neurosurgeon and devoted father, disintegrated under the burden of the evidence. He could no longer hide behind the armor of success. Mrs. Elsa, with the dignity of one who defends justice, ensured that the truth came to light, not only for Miguel, but for all who had been deceived. The photos, the note, the locket, and the purchase and sale contract, each one cried out Lucia's truth. Undoing his father's narrative, Miguel, in turn, felt a liberation that surpassed any physical pain. The tremor in his legs, once a sign of weakness, was now the harbinger of renewed strength. He continued his treatment, but now with a purpose, a flame ignited by the unexpected encounter in the square. It wasn't an immediate miracle, but the faith that he could move, the will to try. And so each day, with physical therapy and a determination that surprised everyone, Miguel began to take his first assisted steps, one at a time, symbolizing not only physical recovery, but the overcoming of a past of silence and deceit. Miguel's voice, once imprisoned, also found its way. It wasn't a shout, but a whisper that grew firmer each day. He began to communicate, to express his feelings, to share his truths. He was seen, he was heard, not as a project to be fixed, but as a boy with a story and a soul that longed for connection. The Riverstone, once his only confidant, was replaced by real conversations, by a genuine smile, by a life that he finally felt was his. Dr. Alencar, confronted with the loss of his son to the truth and the ruin of his own image, had to face the reality of his choices. Poetic justice came not in the form of imprisonment, but in the solitude of a mansion that had become empty of love and trust. He lost what he most tried to control, his son and the narrative, and so Miguel's story teaches us that sometimes the greatest cures don't come from hospitals, but from a simple act of kindness, from an unearthed truth, and from the courage of a boy who refused to remain silent. That homeless man, with his humble wisdom, did not cure Miguel's legs but rekindled his soul, giving him the reason to fight, to live, and to stand up. If this story resonated with you, if it touched your heart and inspired you to seek truth and make a difference, subscribe to the channel now. Leave your comment and hit that like button. Tell me where you're watching from so I can recognize you in the next chapters. And don't forget to share what you would do in Miguel's place using the hashtag #JustYourSonWhoSaves. Thank you for sticking around and supporting our channel.